This is part A of our Exploring Energy Changes lab. We're going to be observing heat changes by me touching the outside of a test tube to determine if the reaction is hot or cold. And from there, you're going to determine whether it's an endothermic or exothermic reaction. We have three reactions we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at ammonium chloride with water, calcium chloride with water, and sodium bicarbonate, otherwise known as baking soda, with 1 molar hydrochloric acid. First, we're going to start with reaction A, which is our ammonium chloride. So I'm going to measure out some ammonium chloride in this test tube, or in this weigh dish. So if you look at this, we've got around this is reading 2.08. It might be hard for you guys to see, but I'll move it back a little bit. Now we've got 2.07 back to 2.08. So we'll go with 2.08 grams of ammonium chloride, and you can go ahead and record that in data table A. I'm actually going to change my camera around just for viewing reasons. Almost there. There we go. Okay. All right, so I've got a bunch of different test tubes. We're going to be doing our reaction in these test tubes. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead, get my test tube kind of situated right here so we can see it. And I'm going to pour in my weighed out mass of ammonium chloride. Keeping them in a test tube rack to ensure that we're staying safe, not making sure that any reaction gets on our hands, and to make sure that in case it gets really hot, we're not dropping the glass. Next, I'm going to fill up my graduated cylinder with 10 milliliters of deionized water. I'm using my squirt bottle just because it makes it really easy. And I already had this one pre-poured, but we've got 10 milliliters of deionized water. I'm going to go ahead and pour that into my test tube. And I'm going to give my test tube a quick swirl. As I give it a swirl, I'm ensuring that the reaction is going to occur. So giving it a swirl, and I'm going to touch my test tube. If you were in class and you were feeling this, you would recognize that this is very cold. So my test tube is very cold to the touch. You're going to want to record that information down. And this is kind of a close-up view of the reaction that's occurring. I'm going to put my hand behind it so you can kind of see it. We still have our solid still mixing at the bottom. Our liquid looks a little bit on the cloudy side, but there is definitely a chemical reaction occurring, and it is very cold to the touch. Next, we're going to look at B, which is calcium chloride. So I'm going to go ahead and get that set up for us. So B, we've got calcium chloride. Go ahead and bring my scale back over. I'm going to zero my scale out. And for letter B, it asked that we add 3 to 4 grams of calcium chloride. So I've got some calcium chloride here that I'm going to add to my zeroed out scale. And we're trying to get in anything between 3 to 4 grams. Pouring that in there, I've got 3.86 grams of calcium chloride. Hopefully you can read that on your screen. So we've got the 3.86 there. And we're going to do the very same thing we just did with our ammonium chloride. So I'm going to have another test tube set up, and I'm going to add our water to that. There we go. All right, so we're going to use this test tube. I'll place it out here in front. I'm going to pour in my my calcium chloride into here. Trying to be careful that I'm not getting any on my skin, because these are skin irritants. And I'm going to measure out 10 milliliters of water in my graduated cylinder. All right, so we've got our 10 milliliters of water, as you can see here. I'm going to go ahead and pour that into my test tube, give it a swirl, and see how the reaction goes. So giving this a quick swirl to make sure everything's mixed. And as I'm touching this one's actually very warm. This one is a very warm feel. Kind of feels like a warm pack, where the last one kind of feels like a cold pack or an ice pack. Looking at this one, If we're looking at our chemical reaction, once again, it's a very milky type of color, but there is a chemical reaction occurring. All right, moving on to C. Going to go ahead and zero out my scale again. This one we're working with sodium bicarbonate, and we just want 1 to 2 grams of that. In case you didn't know, sodium bicarbonate is also known as baking soda. So I'm just going to measure out a quick 1 to 2 grams of baking soda. As you can see right here, I've got 1.18. So you're going to want to make sure you record that mass in your data table A. All right. Our last reaction for the day is going to be our hydrochloric acid with sodium bicarbonate. I'm going to be pouring 10 milliliters of hydrochloric acid into my graduated cylinder. But before I do that, I want to make sure I add my baking soda into the test tube. So I'm going to get that added into there. Baking soda is a kitchen cooking ingredient. It's okay to get on your skin. That's why I took it out of the test tube to do that. So I've got my baking soda added to my test tube, as you can see. I'm going to go ahead and measure out 10 milliliters of 1 molar hydrochloric acid. I've got my 1 molar hydrochloric acid here in its special container. Molarity has to do with the intensity or the number of moles per liter of the acid. So this one is 1 mole per liter in terms of acid compared to water. So lesson we'll learn later. All right, so I've got a little over 10 milliliters of hydrochloric acid. Hopefully this one will be able to kind of see the reaction taking place. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this in. Pay close attention to the test tube right up in here. You're going to see this reaction taking place. This is part of the reason we use test tube racks. As you can see, it spewed up very high towards the top, but it did not spill over. Definitely have some fizz going on. As we touch this one, it's actually pretty cold. Put this back here. So as I'm touching this one, I'm going to be careful to touch it towards the bottom. And as I'm touching it, it's actually cold. You're going to use that information to record in your data table A and answer your questions.